All right, welcome into the Five Reasons YouTube channel. This is Five Guys. We're here twice a week, typically on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Decided to give you a Monday episode because this is just such a seismic event
We
that
couldn't
we
wait.
needed to discuss it. We could not wait. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Donno. You can follow him at Alex Donno. We're sponsored here by our friends over at Water Cleanup, Michael and Robert and his team. From the first leak until the end of the process, your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop. Reach out to them today. They can do annual inspections. They can do the leak detection, the damage assessment, the mold remediation. Let me say that 6 times fast. The water mitigation, all this good stuff, lots of Asians and that they can accomplish for you. Again, Water Cleanup of Florida, based in Boca Raton. They service the entire Tri-County area. If they can't get a deal done for you, if they can't get the deal done for you, they will tell you. That's one of the good things about them. They're honest contractors. Those are hard to find in this business. But again, 105-star reviews on Google. That tells the story. Your one-stop water and mold cleanup shop, Water Cleanup of Florida, WCUFL.com. If you've got the schmutz, they got the guts. I did not think we'd be back here, Alex.
What a time to be alive.
Right? It really is. The 7 years of this were not enough. So this is another cycle. I mean, those did feel like dog years, pretty much. The Ryan Tannehill era, waiting for him to kind of fulfill some of the potential. Did you hear he was a former college wide receiver? I'm not sure if you were aware of that.
Oh, no, I never heard that one.
Same debates, 7 straight years. And the 1 year that he really started to play well with that team with JHI 2016, then he got hurt. And this was a guy who, all the things that we said about him in a critical way, he was incredibly durable during his time with the Dolphins until he wasn't. And then, of course, Matt Moore started that playoff game and they lost to Pittsburgh, and we know all of that. But now it's back in the conversation basically because it seems like the two sides might need each other. And so here's where we're at. Okay, Tua didn't play in the first game. Every time Tua doesn't play, people remember why they missed Tua. It's pretty much what happened in the first game. And he's going to play in the second game coming up this week. But again, you still may need your backup quarterbacks at some time during the season. Now, last year they did not. Mike White, Plantation kid or Pines kid, whatever, came in from the Jets and really didn't have to play much. I mean, he was playing in blowouts, mostly on the Dolphins side. Came in through one big touchdown pass. Excuse me. And of course, Skylar Thompson, who had to start the playoff game the year before. I actually thought he looked worse last year when I got a chance to watch him in camp and in the preseason games than he did the year before. Former 7th-round pick with some ability, but it looks like he might have maxed out. So we'll start here before we get to the Tannehill question because he's available. Are you concerned about the Dolphins' backup quarterback situation?
I don't know. I'm not. I guess I am only because, and it's not so much about Saturday night. I know a lot of people are just knee jerking that the second and third stringer that played in the preseason game played really poorly. Now all of a sudden we need a backup. No, this to me is a concern that goes back even before Skylar Thompson was on the roster, certainly before Mike White was on the roster. And the reason why I have this concern, Ethan, and this applies to both of these backup quarterbacks right now, and it applies to the previous couple of guys. Teddy Bridgewater was not nearly as good as we expected he would be here. Jacoby Brissett was pretty awful here playing behind Tua, is that to me, a backup quarterback should be a true understudy to the starter in terms of when your backup quarterback goes in, ideally, you don't need to change your playbook and you don't need to drastically change the way you call plays. So I think your backup quarterback needs to have similar attributes to your starting quarterback. And these guys don't have it. And obviously, I'm not saying you find somebody who's just as good as Tua, because anybody just as good as Tua is starting for another team, just as good or better, certainly. But you at least need to find someone who you can plug and play into this offense and who has a quick, accurate release. And again, I know it's easier said than done, but Skylar Thompson and Mike White are not similar to Tua whatsoever. But and we'll get into this with Tannehill. I don't think Tannehill is either. So, I mean, there are certain areas where you could say Tannehill would be better than what you've got. But to me, it's like, yeah, I am worried about backup quarterback because you don't have guys who can do things similar to the way Tua does them. And to me, that's a problem.
I'm with you on needing someone with similar attributes, and the best teams have managed to find that. I will say it's hard to find someone like Tua
Yeah,
because first thing, he's left-handed. So now you've eliminated the pool in a lot of different ways, of course, because your line is set up a certain way because he's left-handed. Your protections are set up a certain way because he's left-handed. And beyond that, he's just freakishly accurate. Like for any of his the detriments that he may have. He gets rid of the ball quickly. That's one of the reasons he saved the offensive line last year, and he puts it on time. In most cases, it's hard to find someone exactly like that. Like if you're going to take like a quarterback whose first instinct is to run, which they don't have one of those. But if his first instinct was to run, that would not be a good fit either. A big armed guy, right-handed thrower, 6'5", that's not really it either. Um,
right.
I don't think Thompson's that good. I'll just start there. I don't think he's an NFL level quarterback. I'm sort of surprised because McDaniel knows this position and obviously knows offense. And we're year 3 into this. I don't think Skylar Thompson's going to be in the league in 2 years. Honestly, I don't. I don't see it. Now, Mike White is serviceable, kind of as a third guy, occasional second guy. And I'm going to go totally against where I would have gone before because typically I would say don't even look at Tannehill. First thing, Alex, because I'm just tired. I don't. I mean, we'll get a couple more shows out of it, but like in general, like it was a tired ass topic. I mean, you think we talk about Hero too much, Tua too much, Tannehill. It was pointless.
Yeah.
His upside was maybe 10th in the league, maybe best case scenario. And look, he played really well for one season in Tennessee, but circumstances have to be kind of perfect for him too. But the reason I would have shied away from it was because you didn't want to create. And I have a friend of mine who texted me about this today. He's a big Dolphin fan. And he was basically like, you can't do that because the first time the Tua throws an interception, people are going to be calling for Tannehill. And I said, okay, I would have said that in the past. Don't get a backup that's too good, but you
Right.
just signed Tua to a massive extension. He has security. He's not being pulled, no matter what the fans want. Okay. And so I kind of feel like you need to get the best number 2 you can. And a guy who could actually win a couple games for you if Tua proves to be injury prone this year, which he did not last year. So honestly, I would look at it, but I would say this: I think it was Alfredo or Omar. One of them suggested going a guy like Case Keenum, who I do
Alfredo did. Yeah.
Alfredo, who
Yeah.
is more of a fit for what you're talking about. I don't think they would have to change as much of the offense for him.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up an interesting narrative on Tannehill in terms of the whole fan thing. Now, I am always of the mind that you should have the best possible backup players. I don't buy into that part of it so much, but Tannehill's unique because he used to play here and he used to start here. So, and I can remember, was it? Gosh, the time flies. It was either a year ago or 2 years ago. Might have been before Mike White got here that somebody tried to make this story a thing a year ago where they're like, hey, maybe the Dolphins should go get Ryan Tannehill to be their backup. This is not the first time we've been down this road in recent years. And I remember at the time feeling like, you know what, it might be a little too soon. And at that time, you felt like Tannehill might still be a starting caliber NFL quarterback. I think he's aged out of that a bit. Where I look at Tannehill now purely as a backup, I don't think anyone would consider him a starting quarterback anymore. To me, that would make the transition easier. And to what you're saying, yeah, obviously there are folks out there who are always going to be critical of Tua. And if he messes up, they're going to be wondering, oh, did the Dolphins make a mistake locking him into that deal? But I don't know if too many Dolphin fans, if Tua throws a couple interception, would say Tannehill's the answer. That guy needs to start. No, I think at his age and experience level, you kind of know what he is. And at this point, he's a serviceable backup quarterback. So any awkwardness you might have had a year, 2 years, three years ago to bring Tannehill in possibly as your backup quarterback, I think we've exited that stage of awkwardness. And I also think, Ethan, just from a purely like storyline standpoint, you know, this is not a commentary on his quarterbacking ability so much, but more just for the story. I don't know. It would kind of be a feel-good story to bring Tannehill back full circle, like knowing what he is now, right? Because obviously Dolphin fans for 7 years got very frustrated in Tannehill as your starting quarterback, but you bring him back maybe to the team that drafted him to be the backup. You know, he gets to move back down to South Florida. He and his wife seem to like it down here. we
just don't put the guns in the trunk. That's all. Let's keep the guns out of the trunk.
Exactly.
This is bringing back so many memories.
Yeah.
God, was that a boring era of Dolphins football though? I will say, like,
It was.
I'm just glad that we you won't have Ryan doing the weekly Wednesday press conference anymore. And you know what I would look at? Is Chad Henne, who was a Dolphins starter, okay, didn't work out. They didn't stick with him as long as they did Tannehill. He had some good games, but not enough of them. And then he went to Kansas City and was basically Mahomes' backup. And everybody knew Mahomes was a starter, obviously. Now, Tua doesn't have quite the same level of credibility as Mahomes, but again, he's been paid, okay? So he's the guy. Like, they've committed to him as the guy. And Chad Henne came in and did some things when they needed it. Like that was basically it. I mean, even when Mahomes would get hurt, be out for a snap, 2 snaps, a series, even a game late in the season, Chad Henne came in and played okay. And so I just think that, like, to me, this part about which everybody's always scared of, and I'll read Cap's comment here in a second. Everybody's always afraid of. You have too good a backup that it ends up putting pressure and creating a controversy with a starter. It is different than other positions in that sense because it is the leader of the franchise. Dumbest conversation I've heard today. I'm checking out of this. I'm telling you, Maddie, though, it's out there.
It is. We're not making this up.
Wait till Mike White and Skylar Thompson have another performance like that. I would assume Tua is going to get the bulk of the time in the second game. But we're not. Look, here's the thing about where they're at, and then we'll go to the ad and we'll close this up. Like, they have to win this year, okay? Like, they just have to win this year. I know Brandon Shore has done a great job of moving money around and all the rest of this, okay? But now they've got Tua on a longer-term contract, and Jaylen Phillips was really the big news today. Back on the field, that's amazing. If you consider that he got hurt in December with that injury, he's a freak of nature. He's come back from major injuries before. He obviously has great drive and determination, and was having a terrific season last year. But you can't count on him being the same player yet. You just can't. That would be counter to everything that's happened with that injury prior. The same true of Chubb, okay? But I think even more so with an Achilles for a pass rusher. So we'll see what he gives. But that was the most important thing today. But I do think if you look at it, everything is building towards them having to break through this year. You and I have talked about it. Like, they've got to win this division. They got to win a home playoff game. That's the bar. Like, anything above that, they should be pursuing, but that's the least that they could do. Or else there got to be serious questions here because this thing is set up for them. They've just paid a bunch of guys. They reshuffled the defense, brought in a new defensive coordinator. We have a video on our site. Ron Caniff did about how much more organized the defense looks. That's a positive. And so all of this is moving in the right direction. The thing that could sink their season legitimately is Tua missing 3 or 4 games.
Right.
It could sink it. And it sunk the season. If you go back, I covered the 2002 team. They had brought in Ray Lucas, who I guess had gone like 4-2 as a backup with Parcells with the Jets. They brought in Ray Lucas. Fiedler got hurt in Denver. I was at that game. 24-22. Gadsden got hurt. Chambers had the concussion. Kanoy Kennedy. Fiedler comes out of the room. He's holding his thumb, I believe it was. Out for 6 games. The Dolphins, that cost them the season. They went 2-4. Ray had an awful first game, and they ended up not making the playoffs. And they were the best team in the AFC through 6 games. That was a all-in season. They had, JT had 18.5 sacks. Ricky had, what was it, like 18 or 53 yards, whatever the number was, 1,900 yards or whatever it was. Yeah. And they didn't go anywhere.
It was 18 something. Yeah, I remember that.
1853, I believe. 1853, and Jason had 18.5 sacks. No, I remember all this. And because it was a really well-constructed team, and they were all in. They traded the draft picks for Ricky. It worked. And again, they went and and then by the time they had no margin for error at the end of the season, because by the time Jay came back, they got to 9-5. Then they lost Chris Carter dropping the ball in Minnesota, and then everything that fell apart in the last 5 minutes in New England. And the reason I'm bringing all that up is you can't have the same thing happen. You can't assume Tua is going to play 17. So to me, any quarterback who can get them through if Tua misses half the season, they're not going anywhere anyway. Right. But I'm talking about a 3 to 5 game stretch. If he misses that many games, you can't lose all of them. And so you have to have backup quarterback play that's competent. And that's why I would say Ryan Tannehill's been a competent starting quarterback in the NFL. Not great, but he's been competent. So I would look at it. I want to get your thoughts on that because obviously we want the content, but there's a certain former radio host who's on a YouTube channel. If he's going to bring the Tannehill thing back, though, I don't know that I can deal with that. I threw that one at you. All right, we do want to mention a great sponsor. I will say this: our guy Jose may have a Tannehill jersey in there somewhere, which you could just go get a vintage and then just re-wear it to the stadium for the first time Tua throws a pick. He's got all kinds of jerseys on there, though. Panthers, Marlins, Heat, of course, and Dolphins. Check out jerseys305.com. He's also getting into memorabilia. Here's a little bit more about him.
Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick for the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a great new sponsor that fits with us perfectly. It's called jerseys305.com. That's jerseys305.com. This is your home for dead stock and vintage jerseys from the Heat, Panthers, Dolphins, Marlins, and the other local teams. Their mission was born from a passion for wearing jerseys of the old styles and the past players. Jerseys 305 aims to make every fan stand out from the crowd with unique pieces that you don't commonly see anymore. Maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, but not today. And Jerseys 305 was created by the fans, for the fans. They're diehards just like you. In fact, they're probably listening to this episode right now. So check them out, Jerseys 305, their partnership with 5 Reasons Sports, celebrating with a 10% discount on the next purchase using the code 5 at checkout. Unlock your exclusive savings on the entire vintage collection.
All right, welcome back to Five Guys here. Also check out 5 on the Floor, 3 yards per carry, all the great content on the network. I do want to mention for Dolphin fans, Tuesday night, Pulse of Fins Nation with Louis Sung. Wednesday nights, Inside Leverage has their show every Wednesday. Both of those are at 7:30 at night. All right, Alex. So let's go to it. Okay, you got a 5-game stretch. Tua's out. Do you call Tannehill then? Like, if nobody signs him, like, do you want? Would you make a move like this now, or a Keenum or somebody else if you're not comfortable?
I would make the move now. Because honestly, if you wait, maybe somebody else snatches up the Tannehill or the Keenum that you want or that you need before you have a chance to, because you never know which team may suffer a quarterback injury before you do. So I think if you have, and we don't know for sure if they have identified this as a legit need, as they probably should, because again, there's more reason than just Saturday night to sound the alarms. Like, we didn't suddenly just say, oh, maybe we don't have a very good backup quarterback. That's something that people should have realized for, the past several years, even predating the 2 guys that are here now. So no, I think you make that call sooner rather than later, because you outlined it perfectly, Ethan, that, obviously if Tua were to suffer an injury so severe that he misses half the season, 2/3 the season, all the season, your goose is cooked anyway. But how many times do we see this in the NFL? We see it with Tua before. God forbid anything happens to him this year. But if you are in a situation where he's got to miss 3-4 games, those games he misses could be the difference in getting into the playoffs. And then assuming he's healthy again for the playoffs, then you have an opportunity to advance. So yeah, if you need a spot starter for 2 or 3 games, I'll go on record saying this. I would feel a lot more comfortable with Ryan Tannehill as my spot starter for 2 or 3 games than I would with Skylar Thompson or Mike White. So from that standpoint, and I think it is intriguing that Alf brought up Case Keenum, because again, I do think that a backup quarterback should be a closer fit stylistically to what you have as the starter, even though he's not left-handed, right? So that may be the better option, but either of those guys, I would say, would give you a better chance to win 2-3 games that you need, whether it be to get into the playoffs or just for seeding. Those guys would give you a better shot than the ones you have.
Here's how I look at it in the NFL, and I'm with you, and I can't believe we actually agree on this, that they should investigate this. After considering you and I were both on sports radio during that period of time and got enormously sick of this particular subject. There are 2 positions that can absolutely sink your team. Okay, if you don't pay enough attention to them, and like it's not, and in very rare cases do they actually make your team in terms of make your team a contender. You could argue with Baltimore because their kicker has been elite for so long, but for the most part, this kicker and backup quarterback, like those are the things. Like you don't realize you don't have one that's good enough until it costs you a game. And like that's what I've been concerned about Sanders for, and obviously he proved me wrong a little bit towards the end of last season. But he worries me too when you start getting beyond 50 yards. And again, you're talking about all of the other components of this team have been put together in such a way. They have a play style. They've paid their quarterback. They've got Phillips coming back on defense now. They've got all pro type players like Holland and Ramsey, etc. And then there's this thing in the back of my head that says, which of the games they're going to drop that are going to cost them later, and who's going to be the reason for them. And I know most people are going to point to the offensive line, and that's another good place to look. But I'm still worried about Sanders costing them a game, and I'm real worried about Mike White or Skylar Thompson costing them 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's so I if you can fortify it, you fortify it. I mean, you can't worry about hurting feelings now. Tua has been paid. And if fans want to have that stupid controversy, like you said, at this point, it's ridiculous. I mean, Ryan Tannehill is not the future. We finally agreed to that, right?
Like, I mean, how old is he now? Like 37, 38? Yeah. Like maybe older than that. Like the thing is, like there wouldn't be a quarterback. Yeah.
I want to check that. Hold on a second. Let me see.
I know he's closer to 40 than he is to 30. That's for sure.
I mean, it felt like he was here for 45 years, so I'm not really sure. Hold on. Let me see. Ryan Tannehill, born in 1988.
Okay, so he's
he's 30. He's just turned 36.
Okay,
which again is a fine age for a respected veteran backup quarterback. And if he wants to extend his career a couple of years, that's the way to do it, in the same way that Henne did. And you just hope that's not the case for Tua, that later in his career you're like, well, he didn't really amount to much, but he's paid a lot of money and now he's a respected backup quarterback. I would take a serious look. That's where I'm at. I know this is a ridiculous topic, but they have to plug every possible hole with the best possible option. Egos be damned at this stage.
I mean, Ethan, I'll say one last thing. If we could bring Dwayne Wade back home, why not bring Ryan Tannehill home? I mean, it would be just as good of a story, right?
They're on the same level. In the I wasn't going to go to the Heat today, but I will say, whenever the Heat have brought someone back, with the exception of Dwayne, it hasn't really amounted to much. Remember they brought Steve Smith back. Does anybody remember that? They brought.
I do. He was very old when they brought him back, though.
They brought Eddie Jones back.
Yeah.
Remember, and now most recently, although he was a little younger, they brought Josh Richardson back, and he had an okay season before he got hurt. But usually the player is not what you remember. But Ryan Tannehill doesn't need to be that. And for a lot of Dolphin fans, they don't want him to be that. He just needs to be a guy who can come in and competently run an offense and make a few throws in the event that Tua is banged up. That's it. Can Mike White do that? The thing about Mike White is, seems like a nice kid, big Panther fan, grew up in this area, had some decent moments for the Jets. But I kind of feel like Mike White got blown up to a certain degree because Jets fans hated the other guy so much.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
And so it was like, okay, we got this other guy who comes in and he just bombs the ball all over the place. But again, can you trust him? You're in a playoff chase.
And I feel like certain fan bases just have these weird love affairs with certain players. Like I remember when the Dolphins,
that fan base especially.
Well, yes, but I remember you remember when the Dolphins acquired AJ Feely, and I remember the Eagles fans were like they liked him better than Donovan McNabb. They were so weird. They're like, oh, I can't believe you guys took AJ Feely. The guy was like, this is the guy you're talking about. He's terrible.
He kept falling on his ass, literally. That guy had more posterior injuries than any player in history. And Rick Spielman went out and got him because he went 4-1 under Andy Reid. I mean, literally, Skylar Thompson could go 4-1 under.
You know why Rick Spielman went out and got Rick Spielman was probably listening to WIP in Philly. He heard all the callers like, oh, we should be starting to forget about McNabb. Let's start AJ Feely. He's like, I gotta get this guy.
And Rick sold me on that one. I had a behind closed doors conversation with him about AJ Feely. Rick also brought me by there to show me his draft grades on Anquan Boldin and Eddie Moore, because he wanted to show me that it was Dave who made that pick and not Rick. That's how dysfunctional the Dolphins were in those years, because he was literally, and he's like, see, look at this. I had a 1.19 on Anquan Boldin, which basically means a late first round pick. And he's like, I had a 1.31 on Eddie Moore. It was like a high third round pick, but Dave wanted the linebacker. So Dave wanted the linebacker, and Anquan Boldin is a Hall of Famer. So it is what it is. This is Dolphins lore. So I don't want this season to be sunk like Ray Lucas sunk 2002. Okay. That's what I'm Ray's a great guy, but that was disastrous. Anyway, thanks to Alex. And go to Jerseys 305, asking for Tannehill jerseys. I'm sure you can get those for a few bucks at jerseys305.com. We'll be back later in the week.